Hey. Yeah, I'm all set. I got my 7 steps. I got my management tips. I just got to remember to show the classroom. Um, that's cool. This is gonna be. How much time do I have? Okay, this one might be a long one. I don't know. Okay. Okay. Yeah, if you write stuff down, and then I'm gonna record it and I guess watch some messages. That's gonna be the because I got to unplug to show the classroom, and that's gonna be. So I'm gonna try to and remind me to show the classroom if I forget. Remind me to like talk about. I got everything down, but I'm gonna start off because I want to explain what the 7 steps are. So I went through and did them. I modified them a little bit, and then I've got the management tips that kind of go through there. And then I think I don't know when I should show how to set up. Well, the first step to 7 steps is set up the room for success. So I'm going to put showroom at this point right off the bat. All right, that'll take care of that. So, okay. Yeah, because I know Dr. Irving gives you all the builder stuff from arrival to dismissal. A lot of good stuff. There's a few things I was like, not sure about that, but it's coming together. They've got it up. Say, but there's gonna be curveballs if you have 100%. So stuff you didn't think of. I've heard enough people say that they absolutely love the sessions, love the PD. I think you should get your EDD and you should get some. You should ask for some reviews and feedback so that you can kind of highlight that and maybe take it away from the college and go private. Yeah. I hate the. I think so. I didn't really ask about that. I was being more, proactive. But all right. Well, I guess I have time. I have like 8 minutes. Um, so let's see. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Um, yeah, and yeah. Man, I can't figure. I really don't like the Zoom. you know, I would really convey to your IT department that, do you have a problem with people not knowing who people are in your Google Meet sessions? So what's the point of Google Meet if there's no integration from like Moodle or a launch point? That'd be a huge instructional problem with even college students. And it pulls their authentication. Well, I definitely don't like the way, you know, the Zoom is set up there, because it should pull every one of these teachers are authenticated. No, I know, and it's really discouraging. I'd really like to know how much that costs, because, you know, so I got 2 people in the waiting room, but I have no idea who they are. Well, right, but when you launch the link, you have to type your name, and I've got, well, 2020 just disappeared, and I got Brock guest. Oh, really? Well, you know what it is, I think that the Chromebooks have an issue between, see, Chromebooks are browser based. This really isn't browser based. It's, you know, it's basically like an underlying application that launches. And I think it's launching behind the browser windows. It's not putting it to the forefront. I don't know how it's letting them get by that, but that's my guess. Right, they should probably download the app, but they can't download the app because it's probably restricted, but I gotta start my session, so. All right, bye. Oh, I need to test this stuff. Looks like my mic's working. And the video's working. Hi, everyone. I'm just waiting for, you know, people while they get signed in. It's not quite 10 o'clock yet.
We can shoot the breeze until they get in here. I'm going to be throwing out idioms all day, by the way. Sorry. I should turn my camera off and everything. I shouldn't be allowed. I'll just be recording and watching the chat for you. How about that?
No, I was trying to make you a co-host, but I don't know how to do that.
In the settings, if you go under my name, go to my name, and I think there's the 3 dots. You might have control in there. I don't know if it'll let me co-host or you. I'm trying to think, because I've made somebody a host before.
I don't matter. Did you know there's a raise your hand function in here?
Mm-hmm.
It's I think it's in the screen sharing section. So if you're just joining, we're just killing time while people have time to log in.
Mm-hmm. I can do reactions too.
Yeah, the reactions work the whole time, but I only see the raise your hand thing in the share screen. And
Hi, Sue. Sue's the one that's 2020 PD.
Yeah, you know, Union doesn't have Zoom integrated with Moodle. So, and if they did, your names would just come in without any issues. So when you launch Zoom on a PC or Mac or regular, you know, desktop computer, it should prompt you to put in your name. and it seems as though the Chromebooks might not be doing that. And it could be that pop-up window is actually underneath your browser. I think the Chromebooks are prioritizing the browser window to any type of application pop-up that happens. So and Mrs. Markham was having some issues with the launch of Zoom. And I think that was part of it too. So be mindful that you have windows underneath the window you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. And the Chromebooks are small too. That's a small screen, you know.
Yeah,
so that's,
and I have the same issue on the 13 Pro. So
yeah.
Just a reminder that the 10 o'clock session is beginning, so teachers, please join the 10 o'clock session. Thank you.
I like that. It was so funny. The first day when we heard him come over the PA system, we all just kind of stopped. Like Samantha and I stopped and we were like, oh, there's an announcement. Hi, everyone. Hello. Hi, Christy.
You know, we really didn't need to have the waiting room on for the PD session. We could have just saved ourselves a lot of clicking.
It made me do the waiting room.
Oh, that's right. That's one of the new security measures for Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah. It forces you to do the waiting room. But even when you're screen sharing, it'll still pop up and it'll, you know, say such and such is waiting. So it's not too bad.
Right. Speaking of screen sharing, I should probably get, oh yeah. Remind me about the CDC printable signs.
Okay. I'll put that in my note.
We're going to begin in just a minute, guys.
Let's see. Where are my notes? Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to admit all. Okay, if you're just joining, we've just been kind of hanging out, waiting for people to get in. And I think we got about 16 participants. I think, nope, there's more. I guess we'll give it maybe one more minute, let people get, you know, signed in. I know there's a little bit of a hiccup with signing in and everything. But today we're going to be talking about classroom management in a COVID-19 environment. You know, I've worked on classroom management for a long time. It's kind of been an area I specialize in and have taken a lot of interest in. You know, my wife and I have both taught in inner city schools that have been really rough. We've taught in the Keys with a very diverse population. Both of us have taught and worked at the college level. I have taught K through 12, all subject areas. Mrs. Parmentier Hillary, she's done 6 through 12 and beyond. So we have a lot to, you know, a lot of experience, and you learn tricks and, you know, things along the way. Today, with talking about classroom management, I wanted to kind of cover this in, I've got more people wanting in, it looks like, in kind of like 3 or 4 steps. The first thing I talk about is an actual prescribed book. It's by Tyler Hester, and he was a teacher with Leadership Public Schools in California. I'll talk a little bit about that. So I want to go over the 7 steps to having a great start to the school year. A lot of this is meant for new teachers, but make no mistake, it can definitely help us, you know, seasoned teachers. I constantly am honing and working on modifying these steps and procedures and expectations to have a smoother running classroom. Then I'm going to talk about some classroom management tips, just, you know, things that I do and how I run things. I'm a huge advocate of avoiding issues. Eliminate the problem before the problem happens. That's usually the course of action that I like to take. And then last, we'll talk about some of the building-wide procedures that are coming together. I think it's really important to have cohesion amongst staff, administration, so everybody knows what what the expectations are, what's going to happen, how things are going to work. I think that's imperative. So it goes back to the idea of you have good schools, and then you have great schools, and great schools are the schools that have a staff and administration that talks and works together, and you have a student body that is in line with everything, and that creates that well-oiled machine. And your school becomes a learning community, and that's what we want, at least in my opinion. I think we have everybody in here. We got 20, so we'll get started. So Tyler Hester he's a teacher. He graduated, I believe, from Harvard. He has a degree from Harvard, and he went to a couple of other. I can't remember where he went for his grad, but it was some big school. And in California, it's more of an inner city school. It's a little rougher, and I've seen a lot of different programs come out for students that are in inner city and really rough. But I really liked his approach. He worked for Leadership Public Schools, and he had a really different take on how to start the school year. He kind of combines very strict classroom management with a lot of positive reinforcement and encouragement of students. And he does kind of build in a lot of that gradual release that we're talking about. So he published a book called 7 Steps, and his entire building and district got behind him on developing these 7 steps. So, he not only had his classroom procedures and expectations, but he had the entire building administration kind of in line to support that. And so every teacher was following the same exact protocols. And they had, I think they called it something called, they had homework detention, where they would use the lunchtime and some after school time for students that, needed some extra direction. So maybe certain schools don't have all that, but that's where this kind of grew out of. And so the 7 steps are just that. There's 7 actual steps, and we'll start with the first step. I'll actually go through the steps real quick and let you know what they are, and then I'll go back to them and talk about each one. So number 1 step of the 7 steps is to set up your room for success. That's step 1. Step 2 is lesson plans for at least the first week, preferably the first 20 days. It really helps you get a good start. Number 3, plan to create plans after that for the rest of the term or school year. Number 4, create a culture of achievement. Number 5, practice your instruction, change your instruction. Number 6, draft your vision and goals, not only for yourself, but for your students. And number 7 is prioritizing your instruction. So those are the 7 steps. We're going to go back to step 1. That's what I was going to talk a little bit about. I mentioned it yesterday, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about it today. Setting up your room for success. That's really going to be important with everything that's going on with COVID. With how I've begun classroom for success is having a student supply area. Now, maybe this year students cannot go to the supply area and get their supplies, but still having that student supply area right at the front of the room is going to allow me to easily grab pencils or paper or tissues or whatever and get that to the students as needed. And maybe I'll need to wear gloves for that, but let me kind of give you a tour of the room. What I'm talking about is actually right here. I have a table right when you walk in the room, and that's the student supply area. And I put my pencils there, my paper, everything that the students need, hand sanitizers there, so that, and that's just happenstance, it was there before I was here, but they have everything they need upon entering the room. And with the COVID elements that are going on, I'll probably have to hand these things out. The second thing that I've done with my room is I have my whiteboard here, my smart board, I should say, right here in the front of the room. So I want my desks to face that smart board. But my teaching area and where I control the smart board, I want at the back of the room, as you can see there. Now this allows me to deliver instruction when I have to use the smart board from behind the students. So I can see behaviors that are not desirable happening. I can see the students' Chromebooks. I can see their screens. So I might be able to tell if they're on a, gaming website when they're not supposed to be. And it gives me a better purview setting up the classroom like this. So I encourage you to set up the classroom like this in your own rooms or in such a way where you have full view. And if you're behind the students, it's much easier to see them messing around, because one of the things middle schoolers, high schoolers, and sadly enough, even some college students like to do is they'll watch you, and the moment you take your attention away, that's when they're going to do something. If they have to physically turn around to see you, it's going to draw them to your attention. So that's part of step one. Layout. Try to avoid those blind spots where you're not seeing students and having problem areas. It's very important, step one, to set the classroom up properly. Step two, lesson plans for at least the first week, preferably the first 20 days. This is really important, especially now with us teaching online. If you can hammer out the first week or preferably the first 20 days, during that 20 days of instruction, you don't have to think. You know exactly what you're doing from day to day. You've got your materials set. And when you're on planning, or when you are at home, because that's a reality of teaching today, you can work on the rest of the semester. And in working on that, you can make the changes you need to change to your instruction where you see problems that are occurring with the first week or the first 20 days. And a lot of school districts really push this, and a lot of departments will work on this as groups. Moving on to step three, once you get that first week or 20 days down, then come up with a plan to create plans for the rest of the year. And keep in mind those changes. If something's not working, get rid of it. If you find you need to change things, it's not the end of the world. You can change it. And that takes us on to number four. You're starting to roll now once you have, a semester, a term, or the whole year worth of plans ahead. And it doesn't have to be really specific. You can kind of rough it in. Like me, right now I know I'm going to do short stories, and I'm going to do The Giver, and then I'm going to do another novel, maybe Code Talkers. I have an idea. And that sometimes is good enough, and the details will come as you get closer to that point in time. Now, moving on to step four, creating a culture of achievement. This goes back to the gradual release. How are you going to get students from day one to start taking on more responsibility? And as the instructor, you can focus your efforts more on direct instruction, quality instruction, and you're going to start to delegate some of the responsibility to the students. So you need to figure out how you're going to create the culture of achievement and that forward motion of gradual release, and what the timing should be on it. And students are going to be all over with that. Some students are going to get it the first day, some the first week, some might not get it the whole year, but you want to be thinking about that. This is going to include incentives for curriculum, includes behavior plan, rewards, consequences. What happens if I choose to do the right thing and meet the expectations? It's a good idea to reward students for that in some way, form, or fashion. What happens if students don't follow the expectation? They need to know what the consequences are. If I walk into Mr. Parmentier's class and I have my mask hanging by my ear, I'm going to get a warning. And then if I don't put it on, it's strike 2. And then strike 3, I'm probably going to write them up and send them out for a referral. And if you have that process and you follow that process, it's going to help everyone. We don't want to be writing referrals for silly things like they stuck their tongue out at me. Having progressive discipline is essential. And that's the step 4 is where you kind of build that culture for achievement in. Step 5 is when you're instructing, practice instruction. You need to learn, and you guys don't because I'm newer than everyone here, but sometimes you need to learn the kids, the culture, the demographic. When you have a new 6th grade class coming in, it takes a while to learn what works, what doesn't work. I hear a lot of teachers say, oh, the 6th grade this year is going to be great, or it's going to be bad. That's the culture. And you may have to modify your behavior plans and some of your procedures based on the demographic of students you're dealing with.
what works for one demographic may not work for another demographic of kids. Obviously, the 7th graders last year were much easier to deal with than the 8th and the 6th grade. So that kind of illustrates my point. And then when you're practicing instruction, that's where that comes in. And you want to, as part of that, set up lines of communication. You want to communicate with your students, build a culture with your students, and you want to communicate with their parents. I make good phone calls home. I make a part of my rewards incentives. And you're going to have to make bad phone calls home. If you're having a problem with a kid in the classroom, you need to find out what's going on. Maybe there's something you don't know. So that phone call home is critical. And I know a lot of teachers hate to do that. Or the district I taught in the year, in the Keys, it was really a daunting task because half the parents didn't speak English. So how am I supposed to call home? I would go get the Mrs. Ramos, who's a friend of mine and co-teacher, and she spoke Spanish, and we would call home together. And that's how I dealt with that. Moving on to step 6, which we're almost done, is draft a vision and set goals for your class. These aren't like procedures and expectations. These are actual academic goals. Where do you want students to be? And this is going to go into part of your evaluation, your PGP, maybe even your PLCs. My goal might be I want to increase student reading levels by 25% or 5% or whatever it is. Set goals and set those and make those goals tough goals. Challenge your students, push them, and let them know it's okay if they don't make it. It's the growth that they make in pursuit of that goal. If you have a kid come into your class that's reading at 3rd grade level, well, maybe their goal is going to be to get to 4th grade level. And it's irrelevant that they're not at 7th or 8th grade level. That no longer is on the plate. So you want to kind of draft a vision for the goals and set those goals for your class and for individual students that are at risk or have needs. And that takes us to our last step, which is prioritizing. Choose your battles. You have to do that when you're teaching. Choose your battles with students. Choose your battles with instruction. Find balance within your instruction. You're going to find that teaching online is an enormous amount of work. So like I mentioned yesterday, I'm not one that I don't like to put a lot of time into physical mundane grading. I grade authentically, so I find those elements that are going to really tell me what the students know and are able to do, and I'm gonna assess on that. And when I can, I want assessments to be auto-graded. There's no point in me sitting there for hours grading 120 warm-ups that aren't really going to give me insight into their achievement. So you have to find balance within your grading, your content development, dealing with behavior in the classroom, dealing with just the logistics of the classroom. So and it's up to every individual teacher. You have to prioritize your own instruction. It's how you teach. So it's a brief overview of the first 7 steps. If you want to read Tyler Hester's book, I think Hillary put a link or a note in the comments. I posted the book for you. He gives it away for free and asks for donations. So it is open source, free commons. You're free to take it. He goes a lot more in depth into this, and I have modified some of these 7 steps from what he does over the years. And it's a great resource, especially if you're within your first 2-3 years of teaching. It was very insightful. He also has accompanying YouTube videos, and these videos are not just him talking, it is him teaching in the classroom, and it shows you how it works. Because the one thing I don't like with PD is don't tell me, I don't want to hear Harry Wong say that, hey, the handout works every time, because it doesn't. You might need some other way to do it. Show me this in the classroom. I want to see it actually working. Don't tell me about it. So he does that. He has, I think the first 5 days of school, they videoed his class the entire hour long from arrival to his classroom to dismissal. And it's great. Are there any questions at this point? Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions. And if not, I'll move on to some management tips in the classroom itself. Should probably plug my mic back in.
I just like to say I really like the videos, the video resources. He's really down to earth. but you know he has the theoretical information behind him for what he's doing and why it works. And so the videos, like Chad said, actually demonstrate what he does in the classroom, and then you can modify it from there. He has actual procedures. You know, he has the students practice coming into class, practice raising their hand, practice working together. Very, very pragmatic things that we sometimes take for granted and we forget about. But we need to practice those with students as well. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat, your comments. If you do something similar, I know I heard some people say yesterday that they set up their classroom in a similar way, or they modified it a little bit. Feel free to unmute and share what you do in the classroom too.
And you know, another thing, I guess moving into the management tips, I don't care where you're teaching, whether it's Anvil, Key West, I don't care. Alaska, California, at some point in the classroom, some kid is going to make you mad. And I guess the most important tip that I have for every teacher out there is the moment you let them know you're mad or you show it, game over. Never show never let students see you get frustrated or angry. Try to keep cool, calm, consistent, follow progressive discipline. Let that choice be theirs. If their choice is to misbehave, that is their choice they're making. You have to react to it because they've chosen that path. You're not going to be able to do it 100%. I have lost my cool. I've lost my cool here. But the more you practice that, the better your class is going to run, because some kids will feed off that. They come from home environments where that's the norm, and they're resistant. You're not going to scare them if you yell at them. You're not going to scare them. You're not going to get through to them. But when they realize you're a brick wall and it's cool, calm, consistent, that sometimes deters them. And I didn't want to forget to mention that, you know.
Tammy said in the chat, my kids think I'm mad all the time. I get the mom face. They're like, just yell at us. Don't give us the mom disappointed look. I have to figure out how I'm going to do that with the mask on. Tammy, are they going to still think you're mad at them with the mask on? Are they going to get that?
I think it's just anger kind of exudes from me at all times.
I don't know about that, but whatever works, right? Does it work for you?
I understand what Chad's saying. If kids figure out they can push your buttons,
right?
That's their new favorite hobby. And yeah, I remember a time the kid came out of my room. He flipped me off.
Oh.
And I just started dying of laughing. I said, the single finger salute has been raised. And he was, it made him madder than far, because he just knew that I was going to lose my mind over it. And I was like, no. And so Mr. Morgan came and got him and took him about his business or whatever. But yeah, I understand what Chad is saying. And I also understand what Chad was talking about in terms of the structure of your room. And I was talking to Chad earlier that one of the challenges that I think I'm going to face is so much of how I ran my classroom was based on the physical setup of the classroom, that there was a place to pick up work and a place to drop off work. And there was a system for folders and where you kept work that was left over and all that kind of stuff. And that's all out the window. And Kendra and I were talking earlier about the no touching of papers. That for Colonel Camp, we would take all their papers and put them in the bug zapper overnight. And then the next day we could sort through all of them and collect the data we needed for our grant and all that kind of good stuff. Well, we don't have a bug zapper for every room. So instead of looking at individual sheets of paper from every kid, Kendra and I were saying we're probably just going to have to walk around the room, everybody mask up, and instead of trying to grade 20 items, you're going to grade 5. And, record it in your book right at that time. And that goes back to the concern I had earlier that we are, the amount that we cover, you're talking about planning for the first 20 days. I mean, the longer this thing goes, I'm thinking 20 days is going to take 40. And then I talked to Chad about technology, and for me, it may be closer to 60 before I get my first 20 days of content covered. So that's one of the things that I'm a little concerned with, how classroom structure and how we use those structures to be as efficient as possible do not apply to a COVID environment. There's going to be a lot of adaptation going on, and I'm not good with change. I'm old and set in my ways, and I like it like that. So this old horse is going to have to get up and ride a new ride. So we'll see what we can do. But that was, I see what Chad's saying about organization and predictability and how that leads itself to good classroom management. So I see that, but I'm going to have some help. I'm not going to lie. I need help.
And I think that's what's great about having sessions like this. We can start that conversation and continue to help each other and say, hey, look, this worked for me. And Sue mentioned the idea of being consistent, making sure that everyone is consistently enforcing the procedures and working together. And, you know, yeah, it's going to take some trial and error. This year is different. Just like last spring was different too. And, you know, Tammy, I like how you added an idiom in there too, by the way. I'm going to be adding a lot in today too. Markham is a nurturer, Dr. Kirby says.
Oh, yeah, I am known all over the district for my nurturing ways.
I love it.
Plug is going to find old lady Markham. Yeah, that's going to happen.
we need to get you a little emoji or something. I love it. But I you know, I have a feeling that you know, this stuff works though. I like it, and adapting and being able to adapt is going to be important. It's going to be tough though. Chad and I have talked about this a lot. Man, how do we do this or that? And having someone to bounce ideas off of really does help. So I encourage that a lot. And that's kind of why we wanted a little bit more open discussion and extra time during Chad's session to talk about some of that stuff. So Christy said we need to work on our drawing our angry eyebrows, which I talked about a lot. I'm like, we need those eyebrows. I agree, Christy. We need to work on the eyebrow things. Instead of the mustache thing, we need eyebrows where we just stick them on. All right, I'll let you go back to it, Chad. Sorry.
All right. So that brings me to management tips, and then we've got the you know, building wide everything part. So I have walked into classrooms. I took over for a teacher that was well liked in Marathon, where I taught for several years, or 3 years, and then moved on. And it was a mess walking in there because of the situation under which the teacher left. And I've always walked into situations where I kind of had my hands full. And you can turn a class around in one day. You can. I went in on a weekend. I went in on a Friday to see what was going on. I set up this classroom management strategy and started fresh on Monday. Those kids never lined up at the door like they did. They never did a silent start. We went through it the first day. By Wednesday of that week, my class was the only class within the 4 or 5 classroom area, and we called it a pod, where the kids were in their seats working silently before the bell rang. Every other class was chaos. This can work. And yes, you can pull it back at any point in the school year. It's more difficult, but it can be done. And so moving into management tips, I usually start by having students line up. There's a reason for this. When I did homework, I could catch the homework at the door, and it encouraged students within probably a week to have their homework. If not, it seemed like they could slide by and it didn't matter. But it was embarrassing for them to have to say, "No, Mr. Parmentier, I can't show you. You can't check me off." It was a great strategy. It also allows me to get them calm, and it's symbolic of leave your behaviors at the classroom door and then walk in. And when my kids walk in, I didn't really push it here so much because it's a different demographic, but in Marathon and other schools, they had to be absolutely silent. If they whispered, that was strike one right there. I gave them a warning. So I was extremely strict with the silent start. And that ties into having that bell work so you can get your attendance in and everything else. And then after that, then we began the class and things kind of lightened up. But for that first week, I was very strict. So you need to control how students enter your room. I don't mean to be a control freak, but these elements have proven to work in my past.
I think that's going to be important this year, especially with the mask wearing and the
Right.
being socially distanced. I think that calming effect is going to be even more important this year.
And you can check to see that their masks are on, they're wearing them properly before they enter a contained room, which is important.
And I would always have students tell me if there's something going on. I'd stop them at the door and greet them. How are you today? How are things going? And the students would know they could kind of step to the side, the other side of me, and say, hey, I need to use the bathroom, or I have an emergency, or I have a problem last night with my homework. They felt after a while they got comfortable with that, so that way we didn't bring it into the classroom. We didn't have to deal with it for 10 minutes in front of everybody. They knew that they could kind of come to the side and talk to me if they were having issues, with something. So I modified it a little bit.
It's a great technique. I've always liked it. Once the kids are in your classroom, I'm a stickler for this one. Control all movement. Don't let them, do what they want. I think that's the first mistake. You need to eliminate those triggers, because those triggers are going to be, I'm going to get up in the middle of instruction and sharpen my pencil because I want to distract, or I want to get a note, or I want to poke, Joe sitting in the front seat. Eliminate it. Don't let them sharpen pencils. Remove your pencil sharpener. Have a box of sharpened pencils. They raise their hand and you bring it to them. You've just eliminated all kinds of modes of disturbance and issues. Trash. Don't throw trash away. You bring it, you create it, you get rid of it at the end of class. So I don't let them throw anything away. And it takes them a few minutes to get it because they haven't had a lot of teachers do this. But it's about controlling the movement in your classroom, because students at all levels, even in college, see no problem with getting up in the middle of lecture or direct instruction and throwing something away, which distracts the entire class. So I tell them, throw it in on the way in and throw it away on the way out, and that's it. Don't get up. And if they do, they have to, follow the consequences for the choices they make.
Should I tell them about my first week at Inner City Flint at Northwestern? What happened? So controlling the movement is really important, because my first week there, the students were working, but you could tell something was kind of brewing, over the course of a few days. You could tell something was going on. And this is when I first started teaching, and I didn't have the wherewithal to kind of stop it before it started. Now you can kind of see stuff brewing, or stop it at the door, or, do those different techniques. Well, lo and behold, one girl got up, pushed her seat back, and got up like she was going to go sharpen a pencil, went right by another girl and started punching her out of nowhere. And all of a sudden the students moved their desks back. They had planned it. They knew it was going to happen. They pushed their desks back. They all started cheering. I had to call security. It was one of those situations where it could have been stopped if the movements could have, been a little bit more controlled, because they could get up at any time and sharpen their pencil. I didn't know to think about, okay, I need to control the movements in the class. Luckily, no one was hurt too badly, but that's just an example of how things can escalate from 1 to 10 in just, a matter of seconds. And, luckily we were able to separate them and things like that, but it was kind of a dangerous situation. And this was just middle school. The high school, I can't even tell you how many times, things like that erupted. But again, controlling that movement, especially in certain scenarios. I don't have to do that all the time, but in certain scenarios, when you have 35 students in a classroom, which we hopefully won't this year, but it really does help to make sure that everyone is safe and following the rules. So that's just my one example that stuck with me, obviously.
It really goes back to avoiding circumstance. Just by doing that last year alone, I never had one fight break out in my classroom. And I attribute that to not having any movement. They don't get up. They don't have pencil sharpening. They're not throwing away trash. If they get up, it's direct permission, come to my desk and come see me. So controlling the movement is critical. It'll cut down on fights and whatnot. It'll cut down on disruption, behavior, monkeying around. When you move into group work, it's also a good idea to control your group work. I do buddy work. I'm not a huge fan of large group work, even though we did some quite a bit last year. But when you talk about group work, keep them on task. It is difficult. A lot of times I will time it. I give them 2 to 3 minutes to turn and talk with their talk buddies, and I'll have a timer right on my desk, and they know person 1 is going to talk first, then it goes to person 2. These are ALM strategies. Roland talked about it earlier this summer in RPD, and these are proven strategies. Granted, a lot of the people selling their PD whatever, they kind of proprietarize it and put little bells and whistles into it, but it's all the same thing. So control your group work, your buddy work, limit it with time, keep the students on tasks. That's another way to eliminate issues in the classroom. Establish your quiet signs. I think here, if you hear this, you guys say, if you hear the sound of my voice, clap once, that's fine. I do the clap them quiet. I actually do like 2 or 3 different quiet signs. Williamsburg did the class call out and call back. These are all great things. It's just so that you can establish quickly a quiet classroom. And I've seen all of you guys do this here. Have clear, consistent rewards and consequences for student choices. I can't stress that. Make the good phone calls home. If you have a student, don't let that girl sit there and behave every day where you're dealing with yahoos and not give her or him a call home. Call home and say, man, it's a pleasure to have your son or daughter in my class. I really appreciate them. They're spot on with their work. Their behavior is great. Because you're also going to be making those bad phone calls home. So you have to have balance there. And then choose rewards that are meaningful to students. They don't need to cost you any money. I was doing fist bumps, elbow bumps. I do fist bumps with glitter. I try to make it personal for the students as best I can. And those are some of the most sought after rewards that I have, because they get tickets and they can choose what reward they want. 90% of the students go for that simple acknowledgement and fist bump.
So how are you going to change that? And a couple questions about group work and timing. That's one question. How are you going to do group work and timing in the socially distanced classroom? And 2, how are you going to change your rewards and incentives? Do you have any ideas for that?
Yeah, I've been working on that. I mean, with Moodle, one good thing about that LMS system is we thought about this a long time ago, and they've got the badges. And I kind of introduced that a little bit, and the kids did seem pretty excited about it. So that's one great way to do it. I want to look and see if Google Classroom has badges as well. And what I mean by badges is when they accomplish, not only for curriculum and academic accomplishments, but you need to be able to give them badges for good behavior or going above and beyond and helping another student, things like that. And if Google Classroom can do that, use it. If Moodle does it, use it. Use it.
I use it at the college level. When students complete something, they get a little badge that says you completed unit 2, or you did you submitted your assignment on time, things like that. For some students, it really is an incentive. And for others, they're like, that's nice, whatever. But for some, that gamification really builds, I don't know, kind of like a little challenge for them. They like that little challenge in there. What about group work?
With group work, they're going to be wearing masks, but you have to worry about that contact. So that's going to be kind of challenging, and that's where we need to come together as departments and teachers and kind of think, how are we going to address group work? But now that all the students have Chromebooks, I think that's going to be easier to facilitate, because again, I'd have to check and see if this is possible in Google Classroom, which I don't think it is, but you can actually group students in LMS systems so that you can assign them designated online groups. So they might need to be distanced in the classroom, but they can join a group they're already in Moodle, for instance, and you can give that group a task like, I want you to look at the political aspect of the story, and I want the other group to look at the economic effect, or whatever. You can kind of delegate, and then they can come back as a whole online or in class, and that's probably how we're going to have to address it, is utilize technology to negate that, you know,
Right.
person to person closeness. So
At Williamsburg, we would put the students' names on the boards that they were partnered with, and then they would share a Google Doc. One of them would start it, and then they would actually share it with the people in their group, and everybody in the group could collaborate in that document. Have you guys thought about this yet? How to have students collaborate in the distance classroom or in the online setting? Have you thought about partnering them up in different ways? Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself if you've thought of something, or if this is something you're like, oh my gosh, I need to think about.
Am I unmuted, Hillary?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of thinking about it to partner at home, I have not gotten that far. I'm still struggling with what are we going to do in the classroom, because we're looking at 2/3 of our kids still showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just looking more in terms of what am I going to do within the classroom. A lot of the strategies that we've used and had practice in aren't going to work in terms of the physical part of putting them in a group.
Right.
So it's going to be different. And we did, when we looked at the kernel camp, a lot of the things that we had, like icebreakers, and Miss Madden had a activity where they make like a spider web with string and answering questions. A lot of that got tossed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Rhonda's thing says, I've been thinking, how in the world?
Right.
And I'm right there with her. We've done a lot of talking about it, and we're not sure. Even for those kids coming to school, everybody's talking about virtual kids being at the house and sitting and staring at the computer for so many hours a day, and how horrible that would be, and I understand that. But I don't think it's going to be any picnic for these kids to be in the building and not be able to interact in the way that they're accustomed to interacting. And not only that, the way that they're desperate to interact with, because they miss their friends.
Right.
Mr. Cunningham and I were at the slush puppy cart in McKee last night with our boys getting their ices. And once they get their icy, they just want to stand around and talk. You know, I don't know how much they love their slush puppy, but I think they're really happy to see each other. And so they just want to sit around and shoot the bull. And we try to give them that time, but that's all the social time they're getting. And these are kids who've been together 6, 7, 8, 10 hours a day, for those who share a team, a sport together. And it's going to be hard. My answer is, I've thought about it, and I don't know what we're going to do. And anybody's got some really good ideas, pour them on us. We need to hear it.
Right. I think that you bring up two excellent points. The socialization, you definitely need to somehow figure out how you're going to, work with the socialization aspect, because you're right. They're hungry for it. They're desperate to socialize because they have been so used to that. They've grown up with that. We all have. How do we mitigate that? How do we help them with that? And two, the idea of sharing ideas. I think it's going to be a lot of trial and error. I don't know that any of us have ever been in a situation like this before, thank goodness. But at the same time, we haven't been in a situation like this, so we don't know what to do. So it's going to take a lot of collaboration. Like, hey, I tried this today. Chad and Rhonda were talking. Natasha, I'm sorry. Natasha and Chad were talking in the chat, maybe you can group students up in the Google Classroom, but we're not sure if it can work from class to class. So I think it's going to be a lot of trial and error. And sharing those ideas, coming together, maybe having a PLC where you guys say, all right, what worked this week? Or, what did you try this week that worked or didn't work? It's going to be a lot of collaborating among you guys. I'm hoping. Yeah. Anyone have any good ideas that they are thinking about trying? Feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I know there's some things you can do in Google Classroom. Kids were even making like their own Kahoot questions for for each other as a study guide, and we could see everything that they were doing on the Google Classroom environment. But they were, they were across the room, and they were kind of working together in that way. Staying home. Sue, I like that.
I think
that might happen.
at the college level, we've struggled a lot with that socialization aspect and creating that college environment. I think it's Newberry School. They're a Moodle school. I think they're in England. I can't remember right off. No, I think they're a US-based school. I think they're East Coast. They're one of the theme developers for Moodle. And what they did is they developed a theme so that you have your classes within Moodle. And then Open University also does this, UK. But when you land on the front part of, the learning management system, they treat that as like the building. And so they've done a lot of things like having student news and student highlights, and then having a common area where students can actually socialize in topics of interest that may not even be academically, relevant, but it's a place for socialization within the online environment. And that's important to create. I haven't looked at Google Classroom to see, I don't think they have a main like building or main student body portal, but it wouldn't be difficult to develop that, or even, use Moodle for that aspect if you wanted to. I mean, because it'll be up to the kids, I guess. And there's some measures that you can take to negate that. So
Would it be helpful to start with maybe the getting down some ideas and procedures for the classroom environment, so you guys are all on the same page? Would it be helpful to kind of discuss ideas, throw some ideas out there? Because this is kind of an open time for you guys before lunch.
yeah. I had a couple more things to go through.
Okay, put it in the chat. We can discuss any information or procedures you want to put together while Chad goes over his last few items. Feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. You can use the raise your hand function. If you go to the participants part, there's a little hand where you can raise your hand.
I don't see that.
You have to go to more, let's see, it's under the participants, and you expand it. There's like a little more section, the 3 dots. So
yeah,
like,
no, I see it, okay.
I can raise my hand. I can say yes, no, go faster, go slower, that kind of stuff.
All right, so I only got a couple things to wrap up with. The last thing was you want to come up with a plan how the students leave your classroom. That's going to be really important with the the new COVID restrictions and whatnot. Normally, I'll have students clean up. I'll have them stand beside their desks, have everything ready, and then I'll say, have a good day, and that's when they actually leave. Well, that's going to change a lot, and that's going to get me into some of the changes that are happening here with our school. So we might want to, I think that the way the bus dismissals are going to take care of a lot of the, pulling the kids out. But from what I understand is happening building wide, this is the last segment I have, is students are going to arrive by bus. They're going to enter the front. Drop-offs are going to come to the doors here by my room, 1 and 2. They're going to eat breakfast and go to first period. So they'll get their food and go to first period. They're also got the Chromebooks and carts in the homeroom that students are going to need to get. So during that breakfast time, that's a good point for them to get that. When eating, I'm under the understanding that we need to try to keep them 6 feet apart if possible. We'll have to do the best we can. When they're, Mrs. Madden has a great acronym or an idiom or saying, when they're moving in the building, they need to be masked. So M&M, move and mask. I like that. She mentioned that earlier. 6th and 7th grade, because they're on opposite ends of the building, will probably be changing classes at the same time, and 7th might be staggered because they're in the middle to kind of negate that. I think they're working that out. Dr. Kirby and Mr. Vaughn are addressing some of that. I like the lineup at the door thing. I'm going to have my students line up the door. I would think it's a great thing if you guys also had students line up before the end of the class. It just helps, and it's important to be consistent as instructional staff. Lunch is a little bit up in the air. There may be some overflow in the gym. Miss Markham had came up with the idea of putting them outside some days. So that's going to be something we're looking at and going to have to deal with. And then dismissal, they're going to potentially come back to their home rooms. That'll give them an opportunity to put their Chromebooks away, and bus calls will happen. And pickups, I guess, will be last. Covered Chromebooks. As far as breaks, they're going to be selling snacks in the room. It doesn't look like we're going to have breaks. And we don't really have a plan for, I guess there's not a plan right now for a lot of Blue Room, see how that goes. You know, if students do come into school with a temperature above 100.4, which they may, because if there aren't parents at home, the bus has to take them in, if I understand things right. And then we'd have to quarantine them students and send them to the nurse, which they'll probably catch. We'll be catching that in our morning duty elements. The last thing I have is, almost the last thing is bathrooms. Same as last year, you want to not have them use the bathrooms during class change. Dr. Kirby had a really good suggestion. You know, if you have more than 3-4 requests to go to the bathroom, because they always usually will ask right at the beginning of the hour, and it's always 4th or 5th period. If you get 3 requests within a couple of minutes, I would say take the whole class down and say, okay, because that's going to, you know, discourage those kids that maybe don't have to go to the bathroom, that are just going down there to kind of mess around. And if it takes away from class time and you say, all right, well, you know, what we don't get done in class today is going to be homework. It's going to further, you know, discourage that. So you're going to just have the kids that really do have to go. I wrote a bathroom pass program last year. I'll tweak that. Dr. Kirby liked the idea of using it. He can speak more to this. But what I understand is he wants us all to use that because it tracks the students as they leave the classroom, but you have to have them sign in and out. I'm not a good enough programmer to get automation in there. I'll work on it, but I'm not good enough. But as it is now, if you have them diligently sign in and sign out, it's a quick process. It'll track them not only for you, but for everyone building wide to see. And I have a total area at the very top that'll show you how many total students are going to the bathroom building wide. And if that number is more than 4, you should say you're going to have to wait, or if it's more than 3. And then if it does get to be too much, the administration can look and go, oh, wow, we got 6 kids in the bathroom. Let's go get them out of there, you know? So it's a great system. And Dr. Kirby liked the idea of using that. Cell phones is the same as it was. The last thing I have, and then we can have our discussion and chime in, and everything else is, if you have maintenance issues, I would suggest taking today, writing those elements down. Particularly, I think those exhaust fans are going to be crucial when the kids return to school, because they're going to suck the air out and create an upward draft in your classroom. You need to have a window or door open for that to work well. But when the students are up, entering the room, leaving the room, or when they're eating, I'm going to turn my my exhaust vent on, because it's going to create upward airflow movement, which could be a beneficial thing. And I noticed a lot of the switches are broke. So if you don't have that working, now's the time to get that maintenance request into Mr. Vaughn so that we can get that fixed, so you have it on the start of school. Because everything that we can do, every little thing makes a difference. And I think the governor even, reiterates this, wearing masks. It's not one thing, it's everything combined. So I think
does that go along with the CDC guidelines?
That's one thing I forgot. You reminded me. I put a link into the Moodle, the Union Moodle. The CDC has printable signs for wearing masks and social distancing, hand washing, hand sanitizing, all that. That should be part of your classroom setup and your plan, your procedures on how you're going to have them handle that, how you're going to handle students cleaning desks and wiping down things, or if you're going to do it yourself. But they have signs for that, and that might help you. And I think we should open up and go into discussion now.
Now, are they going to have to clean the desks and everything between classes? That's
my understanding. And what I had kind of drafted up in my I can show my classroom expectations page that I created. I was going to have students wipe down their desks at the beginning and at the end of class. But I guess if you wanted to lighten that up, if each student was to clean it at the beginning of class, they might do a better job because they're the ones that are going to sit there. So
Maybe.
if they do it at the end of class, they might just go, oh, whatever, I don't care. It's fine, and then, the next kid's going to come in there. So I'm going to try to build that into that gradual release as a student responsibility, because there's no way I can watch the hall, be out there monitoring for hats and cell phones and masks, and be in here wiping down desks. So you're going to have to delegate,
Now, Rhonda put into the chat, she said, and Christy concurred, they need to clean all the exhaust fan filters or whatever before school starts. I think that's an important thing to bring up. And do they need a maintenance request for that, or what's the procedure? Maybe Dr. Kirby can kind of chime in a little bit with this.
Well, one thing, I'll go ahead and jump in and talk for just a minute, because Chad brought up a lot of issues, that he and I talked about this morning and the past too, is, this situation changes almost daily. The guidance that we receive from the district, from the CDC, from the governor's office, and all the in between.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, the buses is always a big issue. They always are every year, drop-offs, pickups, buses. We're going to be doing that differently. I think Mr. P hit on that. So I'll leave it there. What will really be a significant challenge for us will be the afternoon. And when I say that, I mean just the logistics of, the kids who are here in person, they'll need to go back probably to first period. I'm loath to call it encore. The teachers know what I'm talking about. We'll come up with a name for it, whatever it may be. They'll go back, they'll put their device into the cart for charging overnight. Cleaning probably needs to be wiped down. So when they come in the next morning, they're ready to go. So also during that time, looking at bus dismissals. If you didn't already know, every bus in the district will be here in the morning and the afternoon. So no longer is Tyler just having 4 buses dropping off kids and picking up kids. Every bus in Jackson County that hauls a middle school student has to drive through our parking lot. So just take a moment and think about that. So they'll be dropping off kids and picking up the kids in the afternoon. So our drop off and our pickups in the afternoon will look a lot different than they have in the past. So also talking about the lunch, Mr. P talked about lunch in the cafeteria. Obviously that's where we eat, is in the cafeteria, but I'm looking at an overflow situation where I will have to post or move some kids into the gym. I would rather not do that, but because of social distancing, that may be a possibility, or that may happen. So looking at that. Also, Miss Markham, Miss Dooley from the central office, our food service coordinator, she came and talked to me about moving the picnic tables, which are in the outdoor classroom, and putting them on the blacktop and dining al fresco, if we could do that. That may be a possibility, but obviously if the weather is not cooperating, we'll have to always have a plan B, C, and D. So just keep that in mind. We'll be moving more lunches this year. Instead of having 6, I'm looking at possibly having 9, and us starting lunch at 10 o'clock in the morning. I hate to do that, but to get them through there and to follow the social guidance that we receive from the state and the federal government, we have to make those accommodations. So I think the big takeaway from all of this is just to be open, to realize that what we're even talking about today is open to change.
Mm-hmm.
School starts on the 25th. There's a lot of things that can change between now and August the 25th.
Right.
So we'll just take it as it comes, and we'll do our best. I know that we will. The filters and any maintenance issues that you have, I have requested from the district to Mr. Gabbard that we get our air filters changed in our in-room units. So that request has been made. If you have anything that is broken or not working properly, let Mr. Vaughn know. He's the new dean of students, so that's one of his jobs. Or if it's something that's very pressing and he's not here, just go ahead and let me know. I've taken care of some issues. I don't mind a bit to do that. I just try to delegate to the person that's their primary responsibility. So has anybody got any questions? I know that we've talked about a lot. Mr. P's talked about a lot. There's a lot to consider, not just in the instructional component, but just the logistics. So which is, and sometimes is, well, not sometimes, all the time these days is quite overwhelming.
Right. Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Thank you, Dr. Kirby, for giving us that information. That's
Oh, you're welcome. And these are conversations that we will continue to have all the way till school starts. So today is not the end all. Like I said, it's a very fluid situation, and we'll have many more conversations, and things I'm saying today may change for this time next week.
Absolutely. We need to be flexible and fluid, which is not easy, but that's the world we live in right now.
Exactly. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Post your questions or comments, or feel free to unmute yourself. You can use any of the functions if you're thinking about stuff. I know it can be overwhelming, but the more we can kind of talk about it and get a plan down day by day, you know, that will help alleviate some of that stress. We're hoping.
I know as some of you start moving in and into that planning phase and trying to hammer out those 20 days and figuring out what it's going to look like when some of your lessons go online. Remember to try to let the instruction drive technology. And if you guys find that you can't do something in Google Classroom or you need more, don't hesitate to ask me. I'd be happy to help. I can try to find solutions for Google Classroom that are probably outside the scope of what they have as far as apps you can attach to it. There are ways to get things to work in there. You just have to weigh whether or not it's worth it. It's my understanding that you can use Moodle if you jump it through Google Classroom. So if you can't get something to work, I would have no problem running a training session if you wanted to use Moodle. The main advantage points over Moodle or any LMS, Blackboard, unfortunately they're expensive, is the idea of discussion boards and quick deployment of assessments. So if you have exam view CDs, I would strongly recommend not, wasting hours and hours typing up a Google form, because they'll pull right into any LMS in minutes. So it depends on your instructional situation and how you want to deliver instruction. But keep in mind, you want to try to replicate your face-to-face classroom as closely as you can online. For me, that's a challenge with annotating and doing reading intervention and close reading. There's some real challenges there. And also with assessment, like I said, I don't like to put a lot of time into, typing questions and whatnot. So if you need anything or if you're interested in that, let me know, because I can do them virtually or face-to-face. It's not an issue. So.
I do that often with Chad. I sit there and I say, okay, here's what I want to do. But I don't want to spend hours, setting something up. If I'm thinking of it in a certain way, a lot of times he'll be able to research something, or we'll research something together and try and come up with a better solution, an easier solution for me and the students. That was always my biggest pet peeve. I would have, the tech department come to me and say, oh, you've got to try this. This is great. And then it would end up taking hours to set up for only 5 minutes, return. And we would end up as teachers not using something. So there's that disconnect. So we try and kind of bridge that gap together between teaching, technology, and instructional things. So feel free to ask. That's what I do at Union. I help teachers all the time kind of mitigate what they can do in seat and online, and so we're happy to help. Any questions or comments? Are you guys just excited for lunch? maybe you just need a break.
Well, that's all I have.
I wanted to plan, the time for open discussion if you guys wanted to discuss anything. Another option is to meet in your groups during this last half hour and talk to each other about, okay, what are we going to do in this hallway, this classroom, this section? Ask Dr. Kirby questions. Kind of put ideas in the discussion board or what you came up with. You can feel free to meet virtually like we are right now, or, you know, within small groups, as Dr. Kirby mentioned, that's okay too. So use the time as you need it. You have about 25 minutes before lunch, let's out. And then after lunch, we're going to meet together again and talk about life-work balance as best we can. And then we're going to do a little bit of metacognitive work this afternoon. Rhonda says, 7th grade teachers, can we meet in the hall shortly for a supply discussion, please? That's a great idea. Yeah, put your stuff in the chat and let people know what you want to work on for a few minutes. This might have ignited some discussion or conversation or side conversations. Those are just as valuable as having, you know, a whole group discussion. So feel free. Thank you, Chad. And thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Kirby, too.
I think that'll pretty much wrap this section up. And I guess if we don't have any other comments, questions, I'll go ahead and end the session. I'll wait for a second.
We can hang out for a few minutes if somebody wants to hang on and ask a question or talk about something. We're happy to help. We hang out for a few minutes.
All right. Well, that'll conclude the session. I hope you all have a good rest of the day. I can't wait to be done with it. So,
oh, stop. What do you mean? That was the last of your session. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? I should make him come to my sessions now. We need to talk about life-work balance, Chad.
I've already done my PD. I'm approaching like 30 hours here.
But this is important. This stuff's important. Come on. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Dr. Kirby and Sherry. Thanks, Rhonda. Are you teaching 7th grade this year, Chad?
No,
You are,
I'm
right? You're only 8th grade? Not
So-
7th grade too?
I like to hear what they come up with for ideas though, because I might think, oh, I didn't think of that. Because we were talking about supplies and I'm like, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
what supplies do we really need? And
Well, how are you going to wash the desks and stuff? Do you have supplies?
For lunch is,
you know, I mentioned,
are it's on your own, please be back in the building, ready to start back at 12:30 for,
I had mentioned
have lunch until 12:30, and I'll see you all then. Thank you.
creating an Amazon wish list and pushing that out to the community. You know, what we're going to need is a lot of hand sanitizer and wipes and pencils and just those regular things we use.
What's the district providing? Anything as far as wipes or anything?
I'm not sure. I think they got masks coming and probably hand sanitizer because they got the little things in the wall. But they don't have like the classroom allocation. Like we used to get $250 a marathon for our classrooms. They don't have that. So I think they're just trying to get a list. And I couldn't really think because you know, when it comes to binders, it's nice, but I think we're trying to do everything more digital, you know, so.
The point you made about walking the students to the bathroom, I used to do that at Williamsburg, and it would save so much time and headache. You know, the students would know that we were going and they would get to class on time. They wouldn't feel stressed. They wouldn't feel the need to leave, you know, during class as much. And so that was a big stress reliever. Are you guys going to have like the 6 feet apart stickers in the hallway?
Yeah, I think they're working on that. But, you know, I asked Dr. Kirby, I'm like, well, if they're wearing masks, does that apply? I mean, you should try to get them to do both, but it's not always going to be feasible. Because if we all line our kids up in the classrooms, depending on how they stagger 7th, 8th, and 6th, it might work, but they might have to be kind of, you know, lined up normally. But if they're wearing the masks, it should be okay. The idea is you need to be able to check them all before they come in the classroom and make sure behavior stop at the door. Check to make sure they're not walking in with them. Because, I mean, with so many kids, even 2/3, you may not even notice, you know, some kids blowing in some other kid's face or whatever, you know. So it kind of creates a bottleneck to where you have more control coming in. So.
Yeah, I think so. Well, thank you for talking about your classroom and management and things. I have a feeling this is going to promote some more conversation for people. I hope, and it's going to be continuous too. Like a lot of people said, how in the world are we going to do this? But you know what? We've, as teachers, worked miracles before. So I think we're going to do the best we can. It's going to be good. Everybody's
Right.
probably shaking their heads. But anyways, all right. We will see you guys back at 12:30 if there are no other questions or comments. Thank you for joining us, and have a good lunch. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.